We continue now at the top of Daf Yud from Meseches Beitzah. This is Beitzah Daf 12a. The Gemara here continues. Mar Savar Gazrinon Tzir Be'emtza Atu Tzir Min Hatzad. One applies Rashi over here says Mar Savar Beis Shammai, meaning Beis Shammai hold the case over here is you're replacing these shutters on Yontif. So one says that we make a gezerah if the hinge is in the middle. So since when the hinge is at the side, everyone agrees it's a problem. So Beis Shammai said we make a gezerah if the hinge is in the middle. It's also a problem to replace such a shutter. Umar Savar, the other one holds a low gazrina. We do not make such a gezerah. Rashi says Umar Savar Beis Hillel. Again, Beis Hillel says in the case of Tzir Be'emtza, you do not make a gezerah. Rashi says V'hanach masnisa lo iflag. The brises are not arguing. Elamarash min and chado, Marash min and chado. V'lo pligi. They're telling us different cases. Masnisa kamaisa. The first brise is Hachikamar saying as follows: B'amed devorim amurim b'sheyeshel and Tzir Be'emtza. If you have a hinge in the middle, that's going to be the machlokas. Aval ein lohem tzir kolikr, but no hinge at all. Divrei kol mutter, everyone agrees you can put the shutter in. Betana basra, and the latter brisa Hachikamar saying as follows: B'amed devarim hamurim the nechlechu. When are they arguing? B'she'ein lohem tzir min hatzad, when there's no tzir from the side. Aval b'sheyesh lohem tzir min hatzad, but when it's at the side, when there's a hinge at the side, divrei kol aser, then everybody would agree that it is aser. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah. Beis Shammai omrim, Beis Shammai say, Ein motziin lo es hakoton v'lo es halolav v'lo es hasefer Torah v'lo es sefer Torah l'rishus harabim. You're not allowed to carry a koton, a minor, or the lulav, or the sefer Torah to rishus harabim. Rashi says lo es hakoton kol mili delav tzorach achila. The point over here, Beis Shammai, is anything that you're carrying on Yontiv that is not a tzorach of eating is going to be a problem to carry it into rishus harabim on Yontiv. Well, Beis Hillel matir, and the Mishnah says that according to Beis Hillel, this is going to be mutter. The Gemara says, Tani Tano Kamei to Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimai, an Amora who taught Braisos, he taught in front of Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimai, Hashochet Olas Nedava b'Yontiv Lok. If somebody shechts in Olas Nedava on Yontiv, he gets Malkus. Rashi over here says, Olas Nedava means an Olas Nedava means a carbon ola. It's not an obligation, it's a donation. The ilu olas chovas hayom, because if it would have been an ola that was an obligation to bring today, so rachmona shari, then it's permitted. Avolzu yesh lakriv v'la'achar yomtiv, but over here you have an olas nadav. It doesn't need to be brought today. You should bring it after yontif. And if you bring it on yontif, again, the Brisa said loka mishum. Why are you loka? You get malchus mishum. We'll see the Mesoras Hashas kol malacha lo yasa b'hem. It says you can't do malacha on yontif, so you get malchus for doing malacha on yontif. That's what the Brisa says. So Amar lei, so he said back to him, Damar loch moni beis Shammai. Who seems to be the author of this Brisa? It seems to be Beis Shammai. The Amri lo amrin mitoch shehutra hotzal litzorech hutra nami shelo litzorech. Beis Shammai say that we do not say that just because hotzah is allowed for its tzorech of ochel nefesh, it's also allowed even if you don't have such a tzorech. Rashi over here says litzorech ach asher yochel chol nefesh. In other words, there's a possible principle to say that hotzah carrying on yontif is allowed litzorech ochel nefesh, and therefore should be allowed for even if you don't have a tzorech of ochel nefesh. So Beis Shammai said we don't say such a thing. We don't say that just because it's allowed litzorech, it's allowed shelo litzorech. The Beis Hillel, because if it was Beis Hillel, ha'amri, don't Beis Hillel say mitoch shehutra hotzah litzorech hutra nami shelo litzorech. They say that when it comes to hotzah to carrying, they say that since it's allowed litzorech, it's also allowed shelo litzorech. And hachanami mitoch shehutra shchita litzorech hutra nami shelo litzorech. So too over here, when it comes to this case over here by shchita, by an olas nedava, because shchita is allowed on yontiv litzorech, because you want to eat, let's say, so then for olas nedava as well, it should be hutra nami shelo litzorech. Now the reference over here, of course, is to Beis Hillel in our very Mishnah. The Mishnah over here is talking about carrying things like a katan, a lulav, a sefer Torah. Like we said, like Rashi said, it's lav tzorech achila. These things are not a tzorech achila. Now we have a machlokas, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai say ein motziin, meaning like the Gemara is saying we don't say mitoch, and Beis Hillel seems to be saying motziin, that we do say mitoch, and therefore by shchita as well, according to Beis Hillel, we should say mitoch. It should have been permitted to shecht and olas nedava. So the brisa that says it's not permitted would seem to be Beis Shammai. And so the Gemara says, Maskif lo Rabba. So now Rabba asks the following question. How do you know that's the explanation of our Mishnah? How do you know that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are arguing about mitoch? Maybe they're arguing whether there's a whole concept. Is there a concept at all of Erev and Hotzav carrying on Yontif? In other words, we know there's such a concept by Shabbos. Maybe the Machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel doesn't apply to Yontif. Mar Savar Erev Hotzal Shabbos. One says there's Erev and Hotzal Shabbos ve'erev Hotzal Yontiv, and that applies to Yontiv as well. Mar Savar Erev Hotzal Shabbos, and that would be Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel say no, the concept of Erev and Hotzal applies to Shabbos. Ve'in Erev Hotzal Yontiv, but it doesn't apply to Yontiv. K'dechsiv, like the pasuk says, v'lo sotziu masla mibotechem b'yom haShabbos. It says you're not going to carry on Shabbos. There's a pasuk in Yirmiyahu. B'Shabbos in b'yontiv lo. So we make a diuk that the pasuk means to say on Shabbos it's a problem, but it's not a problem on Yontiv. Rashi over here explains be'erev hotzah im nesra hotzah b'yontiv. Very simply, is there an isra of hotzah on Yontiv? V'niskanu hilchasei ruvei chatzeres li'yontiv im lav. And then related to that would be, are there halachas of erev when it comes to Yontiv? Of course, if there's no hotzah, there's no issue of erev. V'yein erev hotzah v'yaf agav the ikar hotzah mi v'yaviru kol b'machana nafkalon. Even though the pasuk would seem to indicate it applies all over the place, Yontiv as well, but that's what we see from Yirmiyahu. It only applies on Shabbos. And that's the reason why Beis Hillel said it was okay to take the katan and the lulav and the sefer Torah to Shosarab on Yontiv. Avol shchita she'av melacha, but shchita which is an av melacha, uvichlal losasa kol melacha, it's certainly included in losasa kol melacha. So ein malacha afila Beis Hillel hutra l'tzorech lo hutra shelo l'tzorech. It could be that even according to Beis Hillel, something like shchita, just because it's allowed l'tzorech for tzorech ochel nefesh, it wouldn't be allowed if it's not l'tzorech. V'achmas nisan afila Beis Hillel. And again, so what you quoted above over here, when it came to shchita of the olas nedava, that might be even according to Beis Hillel. So the Gemara continues, Maskif lo Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef asks the following question, and Rashi says, Maskif lo Rav Yosef ahach askaf the Rabbi. He's asking on the question of Rabbah. Again, Rabbah is suggesting that maybe there's a machlokas over here whether hotzah applies to Yontiv. So now Rav Yosef asks as follows: Ela me'ata, but according to what you're saying, now as Rashi over here says, Ela me'ata desvirul hu leBeis Hillel ein isur hotzah liyontiv. According to what you're saying, that Beis Hillel hold that there's no isur of hotzah on Yontiv whatsoever. This is the other suggestion again, that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are arguing whether there's hotzah on Yontiv. So if that's the case, that Beis Hillel say there's no hotzah, so liflegu ba'avonim. They might as well argue by stones. Rashi over here explains, Liflagu ba'avonim, I ein iser hotzah, ein iser tiltal. Rashi says, look, if there's no iser of hotzah, there would be no iser of tiltal as well. Iser tiltal means you're not allowed to move around things that are muksa, like stones. Now, if Beis Hillel hold there is no hotzah on Yontiv, you'd be allowed to carry not only the child and the lulav, you'd be able to carry stones. Shalom neser tiltal elu misham hotzah, because tiltal is only aser because of hotzah. Umashalo gazer al kol tiltum. Now, why did they say they should have made a gezer you can't carry anything? Because what's the whole point? The whole issue is don't carry around something muksa, because you might then carry it to Rosh Hashanah. Well, if that's the case, everything should be muksa. Don't carry anything. The reason why they didn't, says Rashi, afilu alochlim v'kelim, the reason why they didn't do that, let's say, why didn't they say you're not allowed to carry food, you're not allowed to carry kelim? Mishum de'ein gozrim gezer ala tzibur elam kein rov tzibur yicholim lamod ba. There's a general rule, we don't make a gezerah, majority of the public is not going to be able to do it. It's going to be impossible to carry it out. So therefore, the gezerah was only on items like stones, things that are muksa. But the point is, again, if there really is a machlokus whether there's hotzah on Yontiv, and Beis Hillel say that there's no hotzah on Yontiv, so then there should be a machlokus even whether you should carry stones, and Beis Hillel should say you could carry stones. But from the fact that they don't argue by stones, shma mina b'hotzah shelo l'tzorech pligi. You see that really that's not the issue. The issue is not whether there's hotzah on Yontiv. The issue is when you have hotzah shelo l'tzorech, is that going to be allowed on Yontiv? Rashi says, shma mina d'l'kuli alma yesh hotzah l'yontiv. Everyone agrees there's hotzah on Yontiv. Elish min haTorah hutra l'tzorech. But the idea is that it's allowed l'tzorech min haTorah. Beis Hillel is located to hutra l'tzorech hutra min haTorah l'gamri. Beis Hillel say once it's allowed l'tzorech, it's totally allowed. El Rabbanon gazer b'midi dehavei tircha d'lo tzorech. But the Rabbanon said if it's a burden and it's not something that's needed, that's a problem. Kagon avonim, for example, like stones. Aval b'katan v'sefer Torah did tzorchinan l'hu b'yontiv. By katan and sefer Torah, which there's a need for yontiv, it's not ochel nefesh, but there's a need at least. So lo gazer, there's no gezerah. Beis Shammai leslu migo, and Beis Shammai say no, there is no migo. Umidi the tzorach achila shatorah hitzirasu hutcher. If it's a tzorach achila, it's okay. V'sheino tzorach achila bisuro omid min haTorah. And if it's not a tzorach achila, it's going to be asur mido raisa. Again, according to Beis Hillel, once you have its mutter l'tzorach, it's hutra min haTorah totally. The other items you can't carry is just the rabbanon. Beis Shammai say no, that's not the case. The Torah only allowed tzorach achila and nothing else. And the Gemara continues, V'af Rabbi Yochanan savar, even Rabbi Yochanan holds b'mitoch shehutra hotzah l'tzorach hutra nami shelo l'tzorach pligi. That this is what they're arguing about. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, they're arguing that we know that hotzah is allowed l'tzorach, but does that mean it's allowed shelo l'tzorach as well? Again, that's the explanation of our Mishnah. How do we know that? The Tani Tano Kami Rabbi Yochanan, because an Amora who taught Brises taught in front of Rabbi Yochanan the following: Hamevashel gid hanosha becholov b'yontiv. Let's say somebody takes the sciatic nerve and he cooks it in milk on Yontiv, ve'achlo, and he eats it as well, so loka chomish. For that, he's going to get 5 sets of malchus. What are the 5 sets of malchus? Loka mishum mevashel gid. First, he gets malchus for cooking the gid hanosha. Veloka mishum ochel gid, also for eating the gid hanosha. Veloka mishum mevashel basar b'cholav, also because he's cooking meat and milk. Veloka mishum ochel basar b'cholav, and also for eating meat and milk that was cooked together. Veloka, and he also gets malchus, and Rashi over here explains, V'yafar b'yochanan savra b'mitoch garsin and pligi b'shamei u'b'silal u'dekulial miyeish isra otzal yontiv. Again, according to Rabbi Yochanan, everyone agrees there's an isra otzal on yontiv. According to this explanation, Rashi just points out in the pasuk in Yirmiyahu, it's just an extra warning for Shabbos, because Shabbos is chamor. They should listen on Shabbos, but it doesn't mean to exclude Yontif. Yirmiyahu just means to say you should certainly listen on Shabbos, which is much more chamor. So in any case, what are all these sets of malchus? Loka mishum mevashel gid shahabishal av melacha, because cooking is an av melacha. Even on Yontiv again, ubishal gid davar ha'aser ve'eno roy la'achila. Now, if you cook the gid, that's not kosher, so you're really cooking something that you can't eat. V'yomed be'eser lo sa'asa kol malacha. So it's going to be the regular isser of doing malacha on Yontiv again, to lo hoter ela letzorach, because the cooking was only allowed letzorach to eat it. Here you're not eating it. Here it's something that's totally unedible, and therefore it's totally shalol letzorach. Therefore you have a malacha of cooking. V'log mishum mevashel basar b'cholav. Also, he's cooking basar b'cholav. Lav mishum yontiv. Now, this one, the last mevashel, was because he's cooking on yontiv. Here, it's a problem of bishul basar b'cholav. That's not because of yontiv. The malchus, the bishul yontiv hatana le. We already said you get malchus for cooking on yontiv. Ela afilu huchol. Even if it would be a weekday, log mishum mevashel basar b'cholav. You got a problem here of cooking meat and milk. Dechsiv lo savashel gedi b'chalev shalosh pamim. Echad l'sar achilav, echad l'sar no, v'echad l'sar bishul. Like we've said, by milk and meat, there's a problem of eating it. There's a problem of deriving benefit, and there's also a problem of cooking it. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis.